Donald Trump's takeover of the Republican Party is now nearly absolute. Retirements among establishment House Republicans have surged in the last 10 days, and the latest has stunned all of Washington. Congressman Will Hurd, the only black Republican in the House, a former CIA officer, and at 41 years old, someone who only a few years ago was touted as the future of the Republican Party. But now he has announced that he is leaving Congress altogether, and Hurd joins a growing list of Republicans exiting the Capitol, 6 in the last 2 weeks. He represents a swing district in Texas. It's a place that Hillary Clinton actually won against Donald Trump in 2016, and he barely won re-election against that blue wave of 2018. His seat may be very hard for Republicans to hang on to now. And as long as we're talking about numbers, you can think about this. There are currently 250 Republicans in the House and Senate combined. And as of earlier this week, only 5 of them represent states or districts that Donald Trump did not carry. And with Hurd leaving, that number is actually going to drop to 4 now, meaning that virtually every single Republican on Capitol Hill comes from Trump country and almost none from outside of it. Joining us here at the table, the Reverend Al Sharpton, host of Politics Nation here on MSNBC and the president of the National Action Network. David Jolly, this particular retirement, I know not everybody knows Will Hurd's name, but certainly in Washington, this particular retirement has set off a level of drama in the reaction that I haven't seen with the others.
Highly respected, well-liked, well-qualified. If Donald Trump is looking for a Texas congressman to nominate for D&I, there's your man right there, Will Hurd. Comes with a CIA background. The Senate would approve him. Doubtfully he'll do that. I think we're seeing these retirements for a few reasons. The personal prospects of re-election become more and more daunting by the day. The likelihood of Republicans capturing the House and having the majority, you know, Republicans aren't even pretending at this point that they might be able to capture the House next November. And understand, Donald Trump continues to make it worse on these incumbents, because every time he projects this white populist grievance politics that works with the constituencies the president thinks he needs to win the Electoral College, when he does what he did with Baltimore, he is endangering incumbents like Will Hurd and Susan Brooks and the others who we saw lose their seats in those pivotal suburban areas in the 2018 election. Donald Trump is making it harder, not better. And the dirty little secret, Ryan may or may not agree with this, the life of a backbencher in the minority as a member of Congress, it is a privilege to serve your constituents in Congress, but it is a miserable experience. You have very little leverage to accomplish things legislatively, but you still have all the demands of fundraising and all of the leadership requirements to be a dutiful soldier. You're not allowed to speak out against Donald Trump. Many of you sleep in your office. And so in the Trump environment, where you're looking at the prospects of losing your seat anyway, if you're a decent man like Will Hurd, who is trapped between speaking his mind and the reality of Trump world, maybe you go home, spend some time with your family, and pursue other professional endeavors.
Well, Ryan, let me get you to pick up on that. And another piece of context here, I think, on Hurd is when they had that resolution on the floor a couple of weeks ago to condemn Trump's comments, Hurd was one of only 4 Republicans to vote for that. Ryan, you're from where the blue wave hit the hardest, I think. One of those places, the suburbs of Philadelphia. You represented a district. You won as a Republican in 2016, even as Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump. I know that district got carved up by a last-minute sort of redrawing of the map, and you didn't run last year. But you were facing the exact kind of dilemma that David Jolly is describing here. What is that like for Republican members to deal with it, and does it lead them to say it's worth it?
Yeah, so no matter how much you speak out against the president on any particular tweet or policy, it becomes extremely difficult in this very nationalized, polarized environment to get any credit from those who don't support the president. But you do get grief from those who do support the president. And so just as President Trump really had Claire McCaskill and some others twisting in the wind in very Trump states, if you are a middle-of-the-road district member of Congress, it is just, you're between a rock and a hard place. And going into 2020, now here's the counter narrative in terms of why Republicans could win back the House and the pushback. And that is this. There are 31 Democrats in Trump-held congressional districts. So the more that it becomes nationalized in 2020, and the more that the president has Republicans twisting in the wind with some of this cultural stuff that he does, he's going to have Democrats twisting in the wind, too. So that would be the pushback that Republicans will give. Will, it's a loss. I mean, Will is an excellent representative. And of the 6 that you had up there that are retiring, the 2 that are really going to be competitive seats are the Hurd seat and the Olson seat. The other 4 that are retiring, great members, but those are safe Republican seats. The real concern for Republicans is rather than getting a really good, solid governing Republican, you end up with the Freedom Caucus candidate versus sort of the middle of the road candidate, and then you have the dynamics within the Republican conference that makes it more difficult for leadership to get things done.
And those 2 very competitive seats you're talking about, both in Texas, as the state Democrats are going to be targeting hard in 2020, obviously. Rev, we say he was the only black Republican in the House. There's still Tim Scott, black Republican in the U.S. Senate right now. But one of the reasons that Will Hurd was touted as the future of the Republican Party, at least among some Republicans a couple years ago, was that idea of, is there a way for this party to expand its appeal to African Americans? Is there a way for this party to sort of cultivate and showcase African American leaders? And now, with his departure, as we say, none left in the House.
I think that the real problem with that is that when you are in post-Trump world, which hopefully is sooner than later, but when he's no longer there and you try to rebuild the party, you're going to have to show you can bring in people of color and women and others. And I think Will Hurd would have been in a great position by then had he stayed to be part of that appeal. I remember when I was growing up in 1968, I was just a kid just starting in activism. I might have been 14, 15. I remember that the leading guy in the U.S. Senate was a Republican named Ed Brooke. Jackie Robinson was a Republican. So the church I grew up in, the bishop was a Republican. Blacks started going Democratic in the 60s around the Civil Rights Movement. There is the possibility of broadening that as they rebuild the party that Trump has destroyed. But I think that Will Hurd would have been a likely person, as will Tim Scott, to be part of that approach. The question is, and I think that's what Will Hurd had to deal with, could he survive Trump, where Trump is majoring in polarizing and majoring in trying to divide. And I think is interesting what Jolly raised. If Trump wants to show that critics like me are wrong, appoint Will Hurd to the seat that's available. Now, he was in the CIA. He has the background. I dare Trump to do it. It would prove all of us wrong.
All right, he's laid down a marker. Let's see what happens there. It's interesting, though, listening to Ryan and David, listening to both of you describe the sort of pressures that are put upon you as a Republican trying to survive in a suburban area, say, in the age of Trump. I think we got another very vivid illustration of this today. So the president this morning, you probably saw this. This is the president of the United States this morning. He tweeted, really bad news. The Baltimore house of Elijah Cummings was robbed. This is a congressman, and this is the president of the United States tweeting about him. You see Nikki Haley, who served in the Trump administration, U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, left on, by all accounts, good terms, has largely refrained from criticizing him, former Republican governor of South Carolina. She tweets 4 words, "This is so unnecessary," about the president bragging about a congressman's house being robbed. Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the president, responds, "This is so unnecessary." Trump, and then capital Pence 2020, maybe trying to send a couple of different. Yes,
that's what she's trying to do.
There might be a race between Pence and Haley eventually on the Republican side. But Asawin, I'm trying to think that every modern president that I've seen has endured some form of criticism from their own party, and sometimes they grouse about it in private, but they recognize they have to take it. This seems like a very clear illustration. Here is a former administration member who doesn't think the president should go on Twitter and sarcastically talk about a congressman's house being robbed, and a senior White House advisor goes after her for it.
Sure, but in terms of the Nikki Haley tweet from today, I mean, it sort of is small potatoes. It doesn't really have anything to do with policy. And Nikki Haley, since the time when she was in the Trump administration, has really wanted to have it both ways. She has, she said during her time serving on Team Trump that President Trump's sexual assault accusers deserve to be heard. But then didn't do anything about it, just said that because it would be good PR, walked away and kept on being all in for Trump at the time. So I don't think the former ambassador has any credibility on this issue whatsoever. But back to Will Hurd for a moment. I was speaking to a source recently who had spoken to President Trump within the past few weeks or so about representatives such as Will Hurd. And he described, and President Trump in this private conversation described Hurd as a member of a collective of Republican congressmen who, quote, nobody that matters, is how he described him in terms of his vote and support for the Trump agenda. And in a weird way, President Trump was 100% right when he uttered that, because this was not someone the White House ever leaned on when they needed to for a legislation or for his vote. And William Hurd saw the writing on the wall that in Donald Trump's Republican Party, if you are not a MAGA diehard or loyalist or build the wall 10 feet higher type guy, which William Hurd absolutely wasn't, there just isn't space for you in this era's GOP. And so he's getting out.
And Paul, it raises the question, if folks like Hurd, who were touted as the future of the party, are walking away in the age of Trump, after Trump, what is the future of the party? Is it a Trump-like character?
I think that's the question. I mean, Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader now, loved Will Hurd, was dedicated to him, campaigned for him throughout the summer and fall of 2018. Jake Sherman of Politico has leftover stuff from the book that he and Anna Palmer did. There are stories of where he would just go out of his way to help Hurd. This was an emotional gut punch to that Republican leadership team. What comes next? I don't think we know right now. Liz Cheney is possibly the next rising star of the party. She's the number 3 person in leadership. They desperately need women, strong women. After that, I don't know.
Yeah, they had another retirement announcement, I should say, from us.
And she might run for Senate. She might leave the House also.
And David,
can we go to the Nikki Haley thing? Because this is the garbage level insincerity that now plagues the Republican Party. I sat in a room going into 2016 when Marco Rubio was the last best guy that was going to beat Donald Trump, and Nikki Haley said the same things about Donald Trump that Lindsey Graham used to say. What a terrible, awful person he was. Nikki Haley then holds her nose and says, I can work for this guy and I can support the guy. She leaves, and this is the first indication of how major Republicans are going to behave when Trump's gone. They're going to pretend they had nothing to do with it. They're going to pretend that Trump wasn't about them, that they didn't enable it. They did. Nikki Haley did. And you know what? The reason people like me left the Republican Party is because we can never again trust people like Nikki Haley, because the two-faced way they have served in the past 3 years.
So but she added the emoji.
She added the emoji. That's right.
Frown emoji.
Garbage moment.
This is how politics is conducted.
And traditional
now.
Republicans are going to race to Nikki Haley as though she's a hero, and she's not. She's part of the villainhood of all.
Well, we certainly see Kellyanne Conway's not going to be racing towards her. But Paul Kane.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.